Hey guys, this is Tim Stout with the Learn to Earn podcast. Today we're going to do something a little different. I was featured on an episode of the Grinder podcast earlier in the week with Addison Corbin. So we're going to use the same podcast that we did with him for ours because we did a really good job of covering some leadership, some time management things, some things I think will be really helpful for you guys, and I hope you enjoy.
Welcome back to the Grinder, folks. James, the dolphin with eyebrows, is out and on vacation and decided not to tell anybody until this week. So we had to do a little bit of a quick little fill-in, and I think that you guys are going to be okay with it. Tim Stout, what's up, man?
It's awesome. Do I get a cool nickname?
Yeah, the man with skinny knees. Does that work for you?
Several people would argue that. And you know a lot of them.
No. But yeah, no, there's a lot that we can go into. Tim and I are both in the same industry and work it pretty hard. So what are you seeing right now as far as real estate goes? I know we're in different locations, so I'm pretty sure it's pretty much all the same across the board right now.
It is. It's, I've got coaching clients across the country, and the same thing is we're at a listing inventory crisis. Not enough homes to sell, multiple offers, over asking, over appraised value, all cash. All this stuff is coming in and crushing people. Even seeing a lot of bigger markets, probably not as much ours, but the iBuyer is super strong. When you think it wouldn't be, you would think that people would be selling their house for the most amount of money, but people still want that backdoor easy button and doing it.
Yeah, and that's, we went on an appointment earlier this week, and she had a few of those iBuyers lined up. She, the big ones,
mm-hmm.
and they were quoting her 40 grand lower, 30 grand lower, and she called me and she's like, "Hey, would you mind coming out here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would love to, because I'm going to be able to show you how to make the most money out of your property, right?" And we ended up having the conversation, and I said, if I list this property this week, I can guarantee you we're going to come in well above where they're at, and you're going to be able to make way more money on this property. Listed it and guaranteed. I mean, we came in almost 30 grand above where we listed it at, and it was just easy. Right? And
there's no reason not to list right now, because historically in a neutral market, or even a seller's market like we've seen the last couple of years, it goes under contract, we do the inspection, and then the negotiation starts. So things I want fixed, price I want decreased, things I want added to the contract, so on and so forth. Now the sellers are in such a dominant position, they don't have to negotiate anything. And they're going to have a backup offer, and then an offer for the backup offer. So when the buyer comes in and they're like, "Hey, I need this, and fix," you're just like, "No." And if they walk, you have a guy coming to the front door with an offer already accepted.
If not cash.
Very well could be. And it's ridiculous the amount of offers we're getting right now, because there's even programs out there that gets buyers accepted for cash. Yeah. So it's difficult.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's not just difficult. I mean, there's a difference when it comes down to say, okay, well, we're not going to do anything. But also, addition to that, what they're coming out with the contracts is like, oh, if you guys guarantee to pay $5,000 above appraised value, mm-hmm. And it's happening continuously. Yeah. It's insane.
Buying it as is.
Exactly. So, that's just a little bit of a piece of what the real estate market is. But, the reason I wanted to bring you on was I think there's a lot more that we can go into that, business owners can tap into that, you have your own podcast right now that you're pushing. And what is the name of that?
Learn to Earn podcast.
Learn to Earn podcast. So if you haven't listened to it, go look it up. It's on everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Wouldn't expect anything less from you.
Thank you.
But yeah, going into it, right now, something that I've found that I needed to work on was organizational, right? And my skills as far as that goes, I've got the team built out to where a lot of that's taken care of, but my personal organization has come complacent, right? To whereas I'm not checking my calendar as much, or the amount of emails that are coming through, or the amount of offers that are coming through on properties. As much as I'd like to say that we had that organized and it was good to go, this market has changed that, because now it's not just 3 multiple offers or 4 multiple offers. It's 8, 12, 16 offers on a property, and you have to make sure you're handling that correctly, one, for the fiduciary responsibility, but then addition to it, it's like you have to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, because any lack of that trickles down to the client.
Absolutely.
And so what are some of the things that you've put in place or that you've practiced that that would help you with organizational skills or whatever it may be?
The two biggest things organizational is there's two things. One is time blocking and one is leverage. With time blocking, like my schedule is run from the second I wake up at 4:20. I know exactly what I'm going to do and where I'm going to be till I get home the next day. There's a couple non-negotiables in real estate or any other business. I mean, it doesn't, if you're in a sales business, the only two things that matters are appointments and prospecting for appointments. Those are the only two things that matters. Everything else can be leveraged eventually, even if it's not right now. But time blocking is like from 4:20 to 4:40. I'm getting ready. From 5 o'clock. I'm already at the gym. I leave the gym at 7:30. I'm at the office by 8. Prospecting starts at 8, and I prospect till 11. Then I follow up. Then I have some coaching calls. So time blocking, like making time for what matters. And you have A responsibilities, B responsibilities, and C responsibilities. If all the A's get done, you get into the B's, and if all the B's get done, you get into C's. But if all the A's don't get done, you don't get into the B's. Like you don't lower your dollar producing activity. So as far as time blocking, and the second one, like one thing that allows me to be super on task with everything that I do is leverage. I have, for everything that needs to be done, I have someone in charge of that. I have it's not a big team, but it's a 20 plus organization. So it's a pretty big real estate team in our region. And I have people over contracts. I have people over listings. I have people who manage listings. I have people who manage the agents. So everybody has their responsibilities. And my job is to make sure that everybody else is accountable. So definitely accountability through leverage. And leverage can be technology. I mean, it's like we use Airtable. Airtable tracks absolutely everything. I can go on my phone. I can go on my laptop, my desktop, and I know where everything is in every process between a listing and a contract. I know where it come from, where the lead was created, where the financing is coming from, so I can track everything. And we're trying out a new program now. Not exactly sure what it's called, but it brings in all the analytics of like Airtable and your Excel spreadsheets and even through our CRM. So we can, at all times, we will know where every client is, that's in contract, that's being worked, where they're at as far as the pre-approval process, everywhere. Like we know the exact thing from one dashboard. So me and Mackenzie, my director of operations, is messing with that right now. So we'll know within the next 7 to 10 days if that's going to be something we're going to add. But it's another thing as far as you're talking about, as far as being on task and on schedule, because that's what matters. And
that's one of the things that I've always been pushed on. I mean, even from when growing up, my granddad always said, if you're going to do something, do it correctly the first time, right? And what I've noticed is, as much as that's in the back of my head, I always tend to kind of fade to the right a little bit and say, okay, well, that whole decentralized command, so like handing something down to somebody, overly doing that, right? And especially adding too much to somebody's plate can allow that to start slipping, right? And once you start realizing that you're doing that too much, you start taking back on too much, right? And I have that yo-yo effect of who I am. And so I'm trying to learn to pass those on as they need to be, but then also making sure that what I am handling myself is correct. And I think we have to learn that through, just experience, right? And it's one of those things that can tend to be, how do you put it?
Tweaked.
I
think one thing that could really help you with that is because I understand, like I'm a delegator too. Like I delegate a lot, and it took me a while to delegate because I questioned everything that was happening. I questioned where it was going. I questioned where its status was, and you hear so many yeses, you finally are like okay with it. But the one thing that really helped me is realize that everybody wears a hat and everybody is in their lane. Once you have identified exactly what their lane is, they get nothing else. And that will prevent you from having to take it back. And then you have to come to realization as a team leader and a boss that you either build a larger highway with more lanes or you drive more vehicles. You've got to do one of the two. Building a bigger highway has a cost. Just like any road, it costs a lot to get it built, but once it's built, it's paid for, and then you can see more income from it. So it's a scary time now, because do I want to continue to invest in my building when I feel we're at the top? You know what I mean? So it's are we building more roads, or are you driving more buses? That's where you've got to come to. But realize that everybody's in their lane, and you give to them and
what they need.
Nothing else. Yeah. Nothing falls out of their lane.
Yeah. And so that was one of the ways that I wanted to take this, and I think we touched that, and we pretty much killed that horse. So going back into the other half that I wanted to touch into was client feedback, right? Because right now it is such a huge part of a business, right? We went through COVID. We went through that whole, we've got to now go in Zoom calls. We got to do virtual showings. You know, we had to manipulate our business to handle those different aspects, right? And those who didn't, you know, probably aren't going to be ready for the future, as we talked. So being able to take that client feedback, I mean, this week I got a negative client feedback, one that I have not had in years. It's always been, you know, you guys are great, da-da-da-da-da-da. It's always been that good, positive information. So we get a negative feedback from a closing, and it hit me because it was one of those situations where I was like, you know, we were handling this like a regular transaction, and then it kind of came back to me. I was like, one, we've gotten complacent because we have been, we've gotten complacent for the simple fact that we've been good, right? We've been really good, and then the one time where I'm like, okay, well, maybe we didn't have so much communication with a first-time home buyer. Well, go back and put yourself in those shoes. What does a first-time home buyer know about purchasing a home? Nothing. They only know what they've been told, right? Or who they asked their family or their friends. But who should they be talking to about that information?
Their agent, yeah. That's one thing. It's like I stress to my, first of all, get into your review, the bad review. If you're working with everybody, if you're trying to make everybody happy, you make nobody happy. You're not going to keep everybody happy. But because you got a negative review, you took that extreme ownership, which is 100% a boss thing to do. So you took extreme ownership. One thing you have to realize is my team last year, the Tim Stout family team, we sold 403 transactions. Everybody we bought with, 99% of people we bought with, that's the only transition they're going to do within 5 to 10 years. So what we look at as an everyday thing, they're looking at once a decade. So it's a huge deal, and they don't know the intricacies. They don't know that it's going to take 10 days to get through due diligence. It's going to take another 20 days to get through the appraisal. They don't understand that. But we are very apt to look over that because it's every day for us. It's like people talk to, people, come to me all the time, hey man, what do you eat? How are you healthy? And it's like, you just eat healthy. Like, they don't know what the hell healthy is. They don't have a clue. Eat an apple. Like, they don't know. So it's like, you've got to remember that everybody has not walked the journey you have. So they can't see the mountain from your perspective because they've not walked your journey. And
that it allowed me to remember, we had JP Donnell on the podcast, a really close guy with Jocko Willink. But something that he said in the last podcast was, there's some things that you know and have forgotten that people don't even know. And I was like, holy shit. Because it came back to the simple fact that there's things that I never even brought up, right? And I'm running that transaction through my head. Even though it's a month-long transaction, I'm thinking about every single piece of that transaction where it could have been a mistake, right? And I talked to the client about it and walked through where her pain points were, and it was communication. And I was like,
it's always communication.
What?
Something wasn't communicated 99% of the time.
Right. And what do we strive ourselves on? Communication. Has to be. It's on my motto as a company is communication. Yeah. So tell me where I messed up. Communication is like, shit. What? Right? So I had to go back and understand what part of that communication messed up. And we had to sit down as a team on Monday morning, walk through that whole process and say, these are the pain points where that client had trouble. How do we fix this, right? And if you're not bringing me a solution, I don't want to hear it, right? Because the excuses of like, hey, I sent this out, or I'm pretty sure we did our part on this piece is irrelevant because they didn't feel that way, right?
There's only one opinion that matters, and it's not yours.
Exactly.
So I tell everybody, like, it doesn't matter. Like, I love all of my agents, but it doesn't matter what you say happens. The only opinion that matters is the opinion of the
How they perceive
client.
it.
It's like I tell people every day. People, we get a lot of flack about this, but people drive by like Bojangles and Burger King and McDonald's to go to Chick-fil-A. That chicken sandwich is no better than anywhere else. 100% believe that. But people go there because they're felt good. Customer service is always on point. That's the reason people go there, and they wait for a line that's 30 minutes. Me and Nick went there the other day, and we waited for 30 minutes. And because of that.
It's my pleasure.
It's absolutely, it's
right. And so that's that whole concept of if you as a owner of a company, or even as an employee of a 9-to-5, it's understanding if you want to be better and become more, you've got to, whether you're dealing with clients, whether you're dealing with customers, take into consideration if that customer calls you, it's for a reason. Yes, there are some people, Karens, out in the world that will just complain about everything. Yes. But if you've had those consistent good reviews, it's important to take into consideration what that person is saying. Because one, they trusted you, right, to deal with them. And then they also more than likely paid you for your service, right? So how in the world is their opinion invalid? Even if they are just being a Karen, right? That entire aspect it's so important to take into consideration what that person is saying, and then building a resolve around that so it doesn't happen again, right? Because it could be as simple as, you overcharge them a penny, or you completely ruined a deal, right?
Or it's their perception. I tell people every day that it's, I was talking about perception. Damn boy, you tell me hitting the head. I just slipped. Mm-hmm. But people's perception is, it's the only thing that matters. And people want to, like, people get a review and they're like, well, I got a bad review. My clients are like, what should I do? And I was like, you should validate it. Mm-hmm. Apologize. I'm sorry I went that way. That's not what I meant. I will definitely learn from this. But when you go through and argue, you're telling someone's opinion doesn't matter. And we've got a few bad reviews, and I talk to those clients, and I've got several of them changed with not asking. They went from a 2-star to a 4-star, and they're like, they talked to the owner, and he'd called and tried to make things correct. But everything, and you're talking about these Karens, and whenever people get upset, it's a lack of communication. And what I say, it's an expectation talk, which is a communication talk. If your expectation is you're going to hear from me every 3 seconds, the second after I text or call, I'm going to get a hold of you. If I don't tell you any different, that is your expectation. So it's my job to tell you. I answer emails from 9:30 to 10 and from 4:30 to 5. This is when I answer emails. I answer phone calls through the day when my calendar permits it, but I will call you back as soon as I possibly can. When you have that talk with your clients, it's not when they call you at 7 and don't hear from you till 9. That's not urgency. That they understand. Well, Tim told me this was going to happen. But if you don't have that expectation talk, it's your fault. The expectation is you'll answer them the second they call.
That's right. And that was one of the things that we had to put in place. Was usually if you come to us, we're not a huge real estate company. So the way that we structure things is you will be put in a group text between me, my assistant, and the client, right? And majority of the conversation will go through that group text so that everybody stays up to date, right? Until we get to a point where that's irrelevant, or it's not enough, or it's too much, then at that point we would expand into something different. But at this point, it just makes sure that everybody's on the same page. There's no miscommunication or anything. But what we started doing was having outside communication from that group text, whether it be from my assistant, whether it be from me, shooting a quick text versus going through that group text message, right? And so now you've broken that consistency. Whereas, am I supposed to text Addison, or am I supposed to text Camry, or am I supposed to just text in the group text? What am I supposed to do as a client? And so there was confusion, right? And so now we've broken that out. We said the first intro text message is breaking down exactly what the expectation is of what we're supposed to do. You as a client will text me through this and call Addison if it's an emergency or if you need any answers to a question, right? So breaking that out and setting that expectation up front and following through that expectation through the rest of the transaction, right? And not deviating from that.
When you deviate, it gives them permission. When I go on a listing appointment, I'll basically say that I'm the listing agent. What I do well is I meet with clients and I market your house to sell. That is what I do well. The details of the transaction and the things that are going to move you along and allow you to market the best is done with Anna. Anna's my listing manager. You're going to hear from her the second I pull out of your driveway, and she's going to introduce herself. And basically then she does the introduction and she handles them 90% through. I'll answer real estate value questions if it's at a high level, but Anna's very educated and can do that. But the second it goes under contract, she says, now you're going to hear from Mackenzie. Mackenzie's entire job is to make sure you get to closing safely. Okay, then Mackenzie calls, and now she handles it. So we call it the golden handoff. We hand it off, and it's like, and if it's about marketing, negotiating, it's me. Business as usual, it's Anna. Closing, it's Mackenzie. So they know loud and clear which hat we wear, so they know who to contact. Yeah. So it does make it easy because we've had an expectation talk. And the only reason we have expectation talks, we've had expectations not met, people disappointed, people upset. Mm-hmm. And we're like, just like what you're going through right now, we've had to realize that we have to fix it. And you can't fix something you don't know is there. Right. It's like with jiu-jitsu. Until you get choked, you don't know you're messing up.
Exactly. Until that, watch your neck. And that's one of those things that was kind of just on my brain for the past, as soon as that conversation happened, like I just left jiu-jitsu and I'm like, you're beat. And then I get the phone call and I'm like, I'm going to pick this one up. And it was like, bam, Addison, I've got to talk to you about da-da-da-da-da. It's like, that's not the conversation you want to have at 8 o'clock at night.
Or anytime.
Right, exactly. And so it was communication. It was lack of consistency on that piece. And then it was also organization, right? Tying back into what we just went into. There was things that have happened through the transaction where I missed a walkthrough, right? Because I didn't check my calendar the night before, right? As I usually do. Friday night, I just didn't check my calendar. Didn't realize I had to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I wasn't there. Called her at 9:50 once I realized that I was not going to be there. And called her and said, hey, look, I'm not going to be there. I did not check my calendar last night, and that's 100% on me. FaceTime me, and we'll walk through this property together. As much as I hate the lack of what it is, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that, and that was part of what her complaint was because of that. Which
that's a big deal to her.
And it was because she was a first-time home buyer. Whereas in my head, I'm like, it's a walkthrough.
It's going to be okay. Yeah. But for her, this is how I buy the house that's safe for me and my family. You're here to protect me. Where are you at?
100%. And it allowed me to recognize that. And then, get this, on this next piece, going through a walkthrough. Or not a walkthrough, but going to closing. This transaction had been extended through mortgage situations as they do. And during this whole COVID thing, we have not been going to closing, right? Just because sometimes it's been requested that only buyers and sellers come to closing and then separate rooms. And so we've made it pretty much a standard where if it's requested that we come to closing, we'll be there. This transaction closed at 4 o'clock. We got CDC at 3:20. It's an hour away. I'm like, FaceTime me if you get there. When you get there. Yeah. And then that was another piece of the transaction where me knowing that the closing, I've got everything in a row, all my ducks are in a row, everything's good to go for this closing. However, she didn't realize that all the work had been done behind the scenes. She never saw that, so she didn't understand that when we get to closing, I can almost promise you we're closing, right? Because these things have been lined up and the people we've talked to and things have been taken care of. However, it was again falling back to safety. You're not here to help me. Whereas I'm thinking, there's no way. Yeah, we're clear to go. I mean, you're not going to have to worry about anything. Setting the expectation and then following through that expectation and then having the organizational skills and then also being able to say, I'm not going to be able to make it, and then going further into what that actually means and why, right? And not just leaving it FaceTime me when you get there and we'll walk through the closing together.
And that may not have been that big of a deal if it didn't happen at the walkthrough. So what was a little deal become a big deal when because in her mind she had a reason to magnify it.
Yeah, 100%, and she did.
Yeah,
She did, and that was
which is her
prerogative.
she's allowed to. Yes,
Because it comes down to the simple fact of what I do every day is real estate, and I'm good. Really good at what we do. So we tend to forget that there's little things that can become big things in certain people's eyes. And I'm thankful for it sucks that happened, and it sucks that we got the review that we did. However, it's good because it allowed us to open our eyes to what happened, right? And now I can guarantee you that won't happen again, right? And then being able to put stuff in place that minimize the impact or minimize it happening again.
I tell my agents when we're training them that when you're walking down the road of a deal, you're going to see anthills, and in your mind you want to avoid said anthills. Anthills are rough conversations, things that could go wrong, all these ifs. But what happens the second you step over that anthill, when you turn around, it's now a volcano getting ready to explode. And it always happens because it's always going to come up. The more deals you do, the more when you see that anthill, you're like, this anthill, let me tell you about this anthill. Because if we don't get the CD at this point in time, we're not going to be able to close at this point in time. Yeah. So you have that expectation talk. So when something is said, and the only thing that goes through the client's mind is like, okay, that's what he said was happened. Like that's just something else that the same issue become from you were wrong and you lied to me to, yeah, that's what he said. I guess he was right again. Mm-hmm. That's what it becomes to, because you're not stepping over anthills, you're squashing them.
And it's about understanding, going into those anthills and being able to say, a lot of times when we have problems in the real estate business, it's because somebody stepped over an anthill and did not want to have a conversation with you. Absolutely. The attorney, the lender, whatever it may be. That whole situation happens because they don't want to have any conversation, because the lender may understand that, we're probably not going to close this on Tuesday, but we're going to try, right? But they don't have that conversation with you.
Or they have it with you and you don't have it with your client. 100%. And it's always going to be your fault. You were nothing but the rain catcher. You're there to catch everything that happens. And talking about stepping over anthills, it's not only conversations that you have with your clients, your attorneys, it's when the other agent doesn't have conversations with their clients. Yeah. When I first got into real estate, I was still with my first brokerage. I was probably less than 2 years in. I'd sold a pretty very expensive house, especially for that time. Like in 2013, it was like $600,000. So that's a big deal here. And the agent, like, I ran over her during the negotiations. Just that's what I do. I'm a negotiator. And went to go pick up the lockbox and sign. They were doing their final walkthrough. And that client, her client, come to me and like literally was cussing me because of everything that her agent knew but was afraid to say to her. And I'd look and her agent's like eyes were, as big around as a pop can, because she's like, oh Lord. And I'm like, and I pulled up my email. You mean this email I sent to your agent 6 weeks ago? And I shut it down. And I did that because, I was so aggravated. I asked her where her husband was. He's like, where's your husband? Like, if someone's going to talk to me like this, we're going to fight. You know what I mean? That's where I was at with that. And he had apologized when he saw me. He's like, man, I'm sorry. He's twice my size, so that'd have been a good one. But it was because she wouldn't have conversation with that client. And I was able to show her in the emails, you see this? And she's just looking at me. Then she'd look at her agent. She'd look at my phone, and just like she realized that I wasn't the villain, right? And made it a very uncomfortable situation because she was stepping over every anthill. She was tiptoeing over every one of them, and there was a lot of them in that transaction.
And somebody's got to step in those anthills for sure. Like it just is.
It's always going to be done. It may take you a little longer. You may get bit by ants, but it's not going to turn into a volcano to get you.
So, those were the main things that I wanted to hit is it's good for me to walk through these things with somebody else, because there's things that I'm like, oh, you know what? This is the correct way to do this, right? And whether it's having that conversation, breaking down the conversation into, the most minute problem. Is there anything else that you did not like that we did, right? and then following that and following it until there's nothing left to talk about, right? And you're sitting on the phone and you're both quiet, right? Yeah. That once that happens, that's when you can understand what the problem was, right?
And when you get a client that's upset, that's willing to talk to you, keep them talking. They're going to tell you about the time on that second time you met them and your breath stunk. Mm-hmm. Like, they're going to tell you everything. So when you get them talking, it's good to let them talk, because you're going to find out a lot about your business, because you want to perceive that you're the best. I want to perceive that I'm the best. But the only opinion that matters is the client's.
So make a note of that. Write it down in your book. There's been a lot of good things that we've talked about here. Tim is always full of knowledge, as always surprises me. But again, make sure you guys send in text or an email or a DM to James Chapman and tell him that
he's been replaced. By much better looking. And I'm not a hairless dolphin. Is that what you called him?
A dolphin with eyebrows.
Yeah, I've got eyebrows, but I'm not a dolphin.
We went up to the man with skinny knees now.
Yes, you are.
That's you.
That's you.
All right, guys. Also, go take a look at jockofuel.com. They are a large supporter of the podcast. When you go there and you get to the website and you pick your lovely goodies, do not forget to add grind10 at checkout for 10% off. Give us a call. Excited to see where the next time Tim Stout comes on the podcast. All right. Grinder out.